Now, apologies. No apologies have been received. So just to check with members, any other apologies to indicate? No?
No, Chair.
Okay, agenda item number 2, Chairperson's business. To inform members that the Department has advised that the Export Stats and DETI Exports Action Plan scheduled for the 3rd March meeting needs to be deferred as the Department is due to hold a meeting of the Exports Action Plan Working Group on the 18th of February. Apparently, we've been told that this meeting is critical to the future of the action plan and that there may be significant changes to the action plan as a consequence of it. So if members are content that we just hold on that until we have a clearer, more up-to-date picture. Okay, agreed. The next item is a visit by the Latvian ambassador. We have an invitation from Outreach to all committee chairpersons to a roundtable discussion with the Latvian ambassador on Monday the 23rd. That's at 4:30 in room 115. So if members are content that I as chairperson attend that. Okay?
Great.
Thank you. Now we have correspondence here as well from the Progressive Building Society. Now I met with the Chief Executive of, it's in your table correspondence here, I met with the Chief Executive of Progressive along with Mr Shane Finnegan from Aiken PR on Friday. Now their issue is, it's in your table documentation, that basically that as a local mutual they are being, under current present proposals, that they are being excluded from, because of the financial services issue, they've been excluded from any potential benefits that may derive as a consequence of a corporation tax deduction. Now, what they're saying is that, I'm quoting from the letter from Dorina Armstrong, it is our view that within the current legislation that's being drafted, mutual organisations such as Progressive Building Society and local credit unions may be excluded from any new corporation tax as they don't fall within the qualifying trades. Now, it's not so much that it's one particular organisation or company that I'm concerned about. If there is something that we could maybe, through adaptation of the legislation or the likes, that we could incorporate the credit unions, I think that would be very, very helpful and useful. So what I'm going to suggest to members is that if Assembly Research could look into this further and possibly or probably tic-tac with Westminster on this particular research issue around the aspects of the proposals that may be contained within the bill, and I don't know whether the Department of Finance and Personnel maybe have helped there too. If we could commission some research as quickly as possible, because given the pace of the bill, that it's likely to be in Westminster probably within the next month or less, there would be a bit of an imperative that we get this done as soon as possible. Now, I have spoken informally to Mr Knox at Irish League of Credit Unions as well. It might be helpful if the research did establish contact with them and the Ulster Federation of Credit Unions, because if there is going to be some, to use the word, mutual benefit to those organisations, you know, I think it would be imperative that we do it now, because if it's not done now, the facts are and the reality is that probably wouldn't be done. And we've heard presentations from the Irish League and the Ulster League and the Ulster Federation of Credit Unions about their need to upgrade their services. So if there's something that might be useful or helpful to get them to have more money to invest back into the development of their services, the range of services that they have, well then that can only be a good thing. So if members are happy enough that we commission some research and get it back as soon as possible to the committee and see where we go from there. Yes, Gordon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we all got the correspondence in relation to the Progressive and their concerns. I think we would agree with what you are proposing. How it affects other building societies, I think, would be an issue and of interest. Now, do you understand the Minister has agreed to meet the Progressive Building Society to discuss the issues? So,
Right, I see, all right.
Yeah, so we are aware of the issues, obviously, but And I suppose as the process moves forward, there will be other organisations will bring such matters to our attention. So I think it's important that we look at it in a holistic manner.
And just for clarification, it's to look at those organisations which are termed mutual organisations, such as this Progressive Building Society, which are locally based. Sorry, not locally based, local in the sense that they're local indigenous from here. They're not, if you like, the blow-in companies with the brass plate and potential that everybody's anxious to not reward, you know. So if we could just get that looked at around how they may potentially be, well, excluded from the benefits of any potential reduction in corporation tax, and how, on the flip side of that, they could potentially legislatively mutual organisations and credit unions be included so that they could derive benefit from it too. Okay, agreed then.
Great.
Thank you. Now, the next item is the agenda item number 3 is the draft minutes. To table today is an updated copy of the draft minutes of the meeting held on 10th of February 2015 as number 5 in correspondence. That has been duly amended. So if members are content with the draft minutes as tabled, and that's just to include it's a minor action that we didn't deal with last week. So if members are happy enough with that,
great.
Thank you. Now, next item then is agenda item number 4, which is an oral briefing from Manufacturing NI. That's the inquiry into economic growth and job creation in a reduced taxed environment. Page 17 onwards, we have the clerk's brief. On page 19, Manufacturing NI manifesto, and we also have tabled Manufacturing NI presentation and correspondence from Assembly Research, which has been tabled as well. So that's from page 17 onwards. So with us today we have Stephen Kelly, the Chief Executive of Manufacturing NI, Con O'Neill, the Chairman of Manufacturing NI, Niall Irwin, Director of Irwin's Bakery, and Mark Cusgrin, Managing Director of South Derry Coachwork Tailors. You're all very welcome indeed. It's good to see you all again, and thanks very much for coming along today to impart your experiences and your knowledge to us around this inquiry, which is it's very opportune that we're dealing with it at the moment. You picked up on some of the flavour of the issues that are already starting to come our direction before the item beforehand. So, just as who's front is your on as yourself then? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members, first of all, thanks very much for the invitation to meet with the committee again. We have looked at the questions that you've posed us, Mr. Chairman, and Stephen has prepared a short presentation to address those matters.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thanks very much, as Con has said, for the invitation here today. Circulating at the moment is a paper copy of some slides we sent, which I'm sure you may have, just for ease of reference, but also our call to action from Manufacturing Northern Ireland on behalf of manufacturing businesses around the conditions that this Assembly can help create in order for manufacturing businesses to thrive and to create more wealth and employment. The committee are the first to see this document. We'll be launching it later on today, so we're very pleased to bring that in the first instance to the committee. Europe has an ambition that 20% of its GDP would come from manufacturing industries, that Europe would reindustrialise. And the best guesstimate that we have is that currently manufacturing represents about 12.5% of GDP. If you consider growing from 12.5% to the European target of 20%, what would that mean in terms of the success of Northern Ireland? What would that mean in terms of employment? What would that mean in terms of investment? And what would that mean in terms of generating wealth in every constituency? Manufacturing represents roughly about 1 in 5 families actually depend on a manufacturing job. So actually growing the manufacturing base here would make an enormous difference to every constituency that you represent here in this committee and indeed this House as well. And as from our perspective, what the main thrust of what we're calling on the Assembly to do is actually look at the costs of doing business here in Northern Ireland. The success of achieving the responsibility for set corporation tax is to be very welcomed, but is only one of a number of tools in the toolbox that need to be used by this Assembly in order to ensure that the economy grows. And I know that the committee are sharing, and their view is very similar view to ours. The corporation tax is only one element of what needs to be done, and thus launched this investigation. For us, it is about creating the most competitive region in Europe in which to start, sustain and grow a manufacturing business, thus creating wealth. And in order to do that, we've actually presented this document to you today, which highlights the areas that we think that this Assembly can make a positive difference on behalf of manufacturing businesses, absolutely, but then, of course, in a wider sense, all businesses in Northern Ireland. We've presented some simple, straightforward, and some things that actually don't require any investment, which will be a welcome relief, I'm sure, to most members around the table, in terms of making sure that the conditions are created to ensure that businesses are successful. For us, there's really three main policy gaps that the Assembly should really look at. The first of those begins with actually establishing a manufacturing strategy for Northern Ireland. There is a number of strategies on which manufacturing is referenced. There are innovation strategies, there are strategies for agri-food businesses, etc., etc., etc. But there is no real overarching industrial strategy for Northern Ireland. We think that that's a glaring policy gap, particularly as the European target, as they set the ambition of 20% of GDP. And as we may hear, and I'm sure you'll be questioning colleagues here today, there are areas where there's overlap across departments, but there isn't necessarily connection across those departments, which will be critical, I think, to maximising the benefit the corporation tax setting will actually bring. The second policy area is actually on energy prices. No surprise, I'm sure, to the committee, having had your own investigation on energy pricing. Currently, they talk about the energy trilemma. They talk about the need for sustainable, the need for secure, and the need for affordable energy. Well, there's targets on the sustainability area, 40% by 2020. There's targets in terms of security of supply, which is a minimum standard that's required in order to make sure that the lights stay on. But there's actually no policy target in terms of where we sit from a competitive point of view within Europe. And we believe that this is an area that provides weakness within the whole energy debate. And as a result, the area of price becomes the softest and the most fragile leg on that stool, and the one which always gives way. So we believe that the executive should actually establish a target on affordable electricity prices. And then the third one, which was at the formation of our campaign and the formation of our organisation, is around industrial rates. The Assembly has been, thankfully, very good for manufacturers in establishing an industrial derating policy. They've maintained that, and the Assembly has maintained, from a district rate point of view, a regional rate point of view, sorry, held that firm over the last number of years, and that's very, very welcomed. It's ensured that the businesses around this table and others that we represent are still here. However, there's uncertainty about the long-term future of that, and that's actually creating uncertainty in terms of investments that manufacturers are looking to make, because these investments are for the long term. So those are the three main kind of policy issues that, in addition to corporation tax, we believe would make a significant difference. Industrial derating established in law, an executive strategy on manufacturing, and a target in terms of competitive energy prices. If we look at rates, where are we? So you've asked a number of questions about where are we, what's the priorities, well, how are we doing, and where do we go from here? Well, for us, establishing a long-term commitment to industrial derating is critical. It needs to be locked in legislation. How are we doing? The Assembly, as I said, have been very supportive, and as a pre-accession relief, it's something that we have here that other regions don't have, so it's a massive selling point that InvestNI and others should be using to encourage manufacturing investment here, either as FDI or within our existing businesses. And certainly, when it comes to the review of public administration, we all hope, this House and others, hope that the promised and anticipated savings in terms of the review of public administration will be seen on the ground by both domestic and business ratepayers. So the rate in the pound is just as equally important as the industrial derating policy. So what actions are required? Industrial derating needs to be secured in legislation, as we've said. The rate in the pound that we currently see shouldn't exceed its current levels, and already we've seen a number of councils setting a zero rise in the rates, which is to be very much welcomed, Belfast amongst others. But unfortunately, some of the other councils have seen rises in their rates. We need to make sure that the Assembly's policy of holding that district rate in the pound is maintained in the longer term, and that demonstrable examples of economies of scale being viewed by people on the ground in terms of that rate poundage. When it comes to energy, what's needed? Well, energy prices, specifically in electricity, need to be competitive within a European market. I mentioned already about the lack of a policy framework around price and affordability, and that's a massive gap that is impacting all businesses. How are we doing? Aside from the good news from Power NI and Budget Energy last week, those really reflect the smaller consumers in Northern Ireland. As we sit with the regulator's own reports, we're either second or third most expensive energy on everything other than the very small businesses out there. And yes, of course, those small businesses are really important. 50% of the consumption is dependent upon the large businesses that we have in Northern Ireland, and those are the people who are suffering some of the highest rates of energy prices, electricity prices in particular. So there's much work that can be done to set that for ourselves. So the actions that are required, again, it's about setting a target in terms of competitive price for us, and there's great detail in the document that we've provided with you this morning. It is about getting control of the margins that are achieved by the generators themselves. It is about driving efficiencies in terms of how the All-Ireland single electricity market actually operates and works, taking out a lot of the costs that are added to the bill that don't necessarily contribute to the actual electricity that people receive through their wires. It is about supporting demand reduction and allowing people that have the ability to actually be participants in the market, either that's through their own generation on site or aggregating generator units that may be there as a standby. It is about avoiding unnecessary additional costs in the market. It is about breaking monopolies, particularly around the connections policies and NIE's dominance of that. And it is about allocating costs in a cost-reflective manner across customer groups so that businesses actually have the opportunity to achieve reasonable energy costs. Third area is in and around labour. And we have seen a greater investment in providing a skilled workforce, but there's big gaps that still remain and some confusion around who does what, for who and when. It is about investing in that skilled workforce at all levels, and if you wish we can talk about a leadership programme that we're participating in with Queen's University's Clinton School, funded by Dell. And it is about a review of employment laws that makes it easier for people to actually employ people on a full-time permanent basis, and the committee may wish to discuss that further. How are we doing? Well, according to the CBI, we're ranked 45th compared to GB being ranked 5th in terms of labour market efficiencies. So there's a clear difference there that we need to bridge. We've jobs that remain unfilled, not just in the IT sector, but certainly in manufacturing and particular parts of manufacturing. And that we believe that careers in manufacturing, despite the fact that there's 80,000 jobs out there, careers in manufacturing are not necessarily valued the way that they should be. So the actions that are required is about providing a fit-for-purpose employment law regime. It is about a greater availability of quality leadership and indeed specialist leadership training within manufacturing businesses, as well as those entry-level apprenticeship jobs. It is about trying to make sure that there's a closer working relationship between business and education at all levels. And we can provide you with some examples of where it's going wrong later in our presentation. It is about enhancing that profile of apprenticeships, and a lot of work is happening there. It is about making sure that some funding is actually passed back to the employers, because the success rate is a lot higher than it is through the colleges when that takes place. It is about prioritising STEM, and I'm sure you've heard this many, many times from the committee in the previous investigations. And it is about investing in that third level education, not just in Belfast, but right across Northern Ireland as well. And finally, the last area is in terms of some of the infrastructure that's in and around business, both the physical and the enterprise support infrastructure that we have. We need to make sure that serves the manufacturing sector very well. How are we doing? Well, as somebody from the Northwest, clearly the pace in which some of the physical infrastructure projects get on the ground is tortuously slow, 51 years in terms of the strong connection between Derry and Belfast, for instance, and it remains unfunded in many cases. There's certainly a fear that departments are gold plating some of the enterprise support restrictions and rules, whereas other regions in Europe find very agile ways in terms of providing that support. And for us, in terms of what actions are required, well, it is about finding those really flexible ways to support capital investment, in particular in manufacturing businesses. It is about this House lobbying Westminster in terms of some of the accountancy rules around enhanced capital allowances, which will see a large amount of the savings from corporation tax turned back into capital investment in terms of plant and machinery. It is about a streamlined and simplified process in terms of the support mechanisms that are here for enterprise through InvestNI and others. It is about starting the A6 and getting the A5 up and running and making sure that we've broadband and those other kind of key business infrastructures out there and being able to use those infrastructures in terms of getting product to and from ports. It is about the ferry travel that we have, which is sometimes 5 times more expensive between here in Scotland than it is between England and France. And it is about trying to make sure that there's a single delivery body for capital spending projects here that the House and the Assembly is actually providing for. I'm not going into detail in terms of that summary. I'm sure you'll want to have a conversation around that. But just to remind the committee that the kind of 3 key policy areas for us are around providing the manufacturing strategy, an overarching one, and cross-departmental one for Northern Ireland. It is about securing industrial derating in law, and it is about setting a target in terms of competitive energy prices. That's us, Chairman.
Thanks very much indeed, Stephen. As I was going through your list of stuff there, I was thinking to myself, if you were going abroad, right, how would you sell the North at the minute, and how would you hope to sell it? That's essentially what the inquiry is about.
We have a very creative, innovative, industrious workforce. It's a workforce that has proved itself to be able to compete internationally, and that's the kind of key area that we would concentrate on. We have, particularly in manufacturing, a lot of very strong family-owned businesses, and those strong family-owned businesses have proven themselves internationally to be able to win, and that's the area that we would focus on.
Right.
The counter to that is that they need to be given the conditions that they need in order to be able to continue to compete and in order to compete more often and in other markets. And those that will only happen if we can really establish and get to grips with the cost base that we have in the areas outside of what the business can control themselves.
And just taking it a stage further than that, the cost base and the issues that you've raised, the infrastructure and stuff, could have brought it, taken a stage further, and that is looking ahead to the R&D, the innovation. Is there more stuff that really needs to be done either here or by way of selling ourselves and attracting those? Because I looked at, and it'd probably be helpful to yourselves too, very, very good research paper from the Assembly Research that we'll share with you after the meeting. And again, we look south of the border where they've gone for key specialist sectors and have sought out specialisms in key areas. Is there anything that you feel needs, where the game has to be upped a bit there, whether in research, whether it's in sectoral advancement or specialisms of the northern economy?
There's kind of 2 things that continually come back to me in my travels around the country, visiting manufacturing businesses. The first is that the administration around, whether it's R&D, or whether it's Invest NI support or any other engagement that they may have with government, is a very burdensome process for them. They're busily getting on and doing their own work. They're busily getting on and selling their products at home, at markets at home and abroad.
Yes.
And the additional burden of that administration is something that they neither look forward to or welcome or seek out in many respects. So in our document, we talk about a more agile form of enterprise support. Certainly our understanding is when it comes to the Republic of Ireland, there's there's greater investment in that account management, that client management process, where it's almost that it's not just about hand-holding, but it's almost that the whole process is smoothed out by the people that are experts in the administration side, and that isn't necessarily the manufacturers themselves. So certainly that greater agility in terms of providing that support would be something to be very much welcome.
Could you maybe just, I saw that word used and it has popped up several times. In practice, what would you see as that meaning? In other words, what's maybe not being done to the same extent or in the same way at the moment that should be done?
There seems to be, I'm not being critical of Invest NI here, just to be clear, but there seems to be, certainly with Enterprise Ireland, a much hungrier approach to making sure that the funding that is available is made available, and that the process is revolving around making sure that funding is accessed, is achieved in a much more smooth way for the businesses.
Yes.
Certainly that's the comments that we get back from others. We've noticed a big change within Invest NI, to be fair. I think it was safe to say that the relationship wasn't the best to begin with, not necessarily with our organisation, but with manufacturing in general. The organisation has changed and has become much more enterprise focused themselves in terms of how they approach their work, and that's to be welcomed and encouraged for the matter. However, it doesn't always filter down to every single layer within the organisation, and sometimes you're very dependent upon getting really good client managers in order to support the processes you're running through with them. In terms of the leadership and making sure that they understand what the priors are and helping provide the assurance that colleagues within Invest NI need, we found the leadership to be very supportive there, and we would hope that would continue.
Okay, thank you. Move over to Mr. Frew. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your attendance here today on this, what is a very important inquiry for us to be undertaking. And you'll know me, whilst this has been generated out of the corporation tax debate, for me, and I've said this many times in the Chamber and indeed in this room and committee, when I speak to the large employers in my constituency, mostly manufacturers, what they tell me is what's more important than corporation tax powers is the cost of energy. When you look across Europe, and when you look at the countries, nations that we should be looking at for best example, best practice, you look to Germany, of course, and they made a decision some time ago about their network charges. And of course the Republic of Ireland also have a different tariff to us. What would your views on changing the tariff in this country, and then how would it affect all the customers, particularly the domestic customers?
I think, Paul, firstly, I think the first thing we would like to see a focus on is the size of the cake before it's sliced, and to say, can the size of that cake be reduced in terms of the overall cost base of the network that we have. And we've seen some elements within that cost mix increase year on year, and it's something that actually Stephen's actively talking to both the Regulator's Office and Sony about. So I think we've got to try and say, how can we take that cost base down? The second thing is those two jurisdictions you've mentioned took a very aggressive approach in saying, right, we're going to guarantee that manufacturing and other high energy use businesses have an affordable cost, therefore create the employment, and therefore through that employment generate the wages that then the non-industrial sector members who are sort of having to pay that higher cost, then at least they've got a wage cost to pay it, or the cost is dealt with some other way in their accounting. But certainly we've seen that's not just energy costs. Stephen was, as part of a programme recently which we got organised with Dell and the Clinton Institute up at Queen's. One of the modules was a 4-day trip to Germany, both from an academic and a practical factory visit to see manufacturing businesses and how Germany is approaching it. And certainly what we found out in speaking to those companies that were visited was that it wasn't just energy that was more agile for them and more cost effective. There was a number of other issues, and they generally felt that their manufacturing sector was fostered and people were very focused not just on the direct employment that those manufacturing businesses given, but the indirect employment. And sometimes we lose sight of that, especially in rural areas where, whilst there might be one big factory, it might be the focus of a lot of employment, but there's the supply chain, not just those doing services, but those doing subcontract services as well. So I think we need to focus on driving down the total cost in energy, and I also think that if we are going to be more favourable to the industrial sector, then there needs to be some proportionate adjustment on how the domestic sector is addressed. The Republic of Ireland seems to have got a reasonable balance on that at the minute, and it certainly, in terms of attracting the large pharmaceutical and IT jobs, certainly seems to be working. You know, because whilst there may be sometimes announcements of job losses, they generally seem to be replaced with new announcements. That may come back, Chairman, to your point about where they have also targeted certain sectors in terms of market sectors. So they seem to have a targeted market sector, the type of jobs they want. They've looked at the energy policy and other support mechanisms around that to sort of bolt it all together, so it's a joined-up approach.
With regards to the cost of carbon charge within our industrial bills, and then, of course, the capacity payments that are made, whilst you talk about a smaller cake or pie, if you like, would you support the decoupling from the system marginal price of a carbon cost to the generators who do not use carbon, and then also with the capacity cost? If renewable energy, for instance, can't be relied upon, then why should they get a capacity payment?
Chairman, we very much support the committee's view on that. Certainly those were two of the key recommendations from the committee's report on energy prices, and we've since written to the committee and offered our support to those. It's our view that generators should get a fair price for the work that they do, and it's a very important piece of work, absolutely. But they should only really achieve the price that's due to them, and not necessarily receive payment for things that they're neither consuming nor generating.
With regards to the North-South Interconnector, which is vital, of course, for security of supply and also on perfection costs, I think Action 5 in your report indicates that there be a mechanism for receiving support from Europe for the North-South Interconnector. Can you give us more detail on that, just where you think that support would come from?
Well, look, we don't have the detail behind that, Paul, but certainly other regions seem to be very good at achieving European funding for their infrastructure projects. Europe has also set an ambition that Europe become more greatly interconnected in terms of their energy. So this is a European objective. There seems to be funding available that others were able to get. And it's our view that that cost, I think the last estimate I seen for that North-South Interconnector was 150 million euros. Then even if it's €1 million off that, it's much better than nothing, because what needs to be borne in mind is that every single euro, cent, pound, pence of that is actually passed through to customers. So anything that can be achieved to reduce that cost has to be welcomed.
With regards to North-South Interconnector, and if we ever get it up on the ground, and we desperately need it, of course, that would take about approximately 30 million off what is the imperfection charge of about 160 million. Maybe it's been up since. 30 million off 160 is not that much of a cut, really, for something we badly, desperately need. What other means and ways can we reduce imperfection costs?
I think, Paul, what I would say on that, first of all, is that whilst 30 million mightn't sound an awful lot, what people need to realise, especially in the large energy users, is a few point noughts of a pence
Yeah.
on the volume they're consuming actually can add up very, very quick. And before long, you're at the cost of a job, you know, or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, because the volume these guys are consuming, despite all their endeavours to sort of be efficient. So I think any reduction, and I think I've said before to the committee, is that what we've got to try and do is continuously take off a little bit here, a little bit there, and not just think, well, it's only a few million. If we can get a little bit off each of the cost elements of that cake I referred to, then gradually we start to take down the cost base. And that's what we've got to focus on. You know, it's not always about going for one big, you know, 100 million. I think what we've got to focus on here is let's take an issue, look at it, make sure we're getting value for money on it, see what savings we can make and try and get more savings. The part of the problem we have is that we're a small organisation. The complexity of the electricity market at times is really, really hard to get your mind around. And it seems that once you turn that button over here, you haven't realised, but you've indirectly turned that button over here. And we need to get focus through the regulator's office and Sony on trying to take more of this cost out. Because the imperfections, one, is very difficult to understand. It's difficult for us to understand at times about why the connection charges for some manufacturing businesses that want to expand are so high as well. And we just need to continually challenge that cost base.
With regards to the movement on the aggregated generator units and the demand side units, which in my eyes, looking at it, seems to be a positive step, a step in the right direction. There was this issue about large users becoming independent of the grid and network. How will this alleviate the problem, or how does this fit in to that issue? And what other incentives are out there, like of the renewable heat incentive, that will actually help manufacturers?
Yeah, well, Paul, there's a couple of things in that. The regulator has announced at the end of last month that licensing arrangements will be put in place for demand-side units and aggregating generator units, and that will allow manufacturers to participate in the market. And it may be only a few £1,000s, or maybe more for some, depending on the availability. But that all comes off the overall price and has to be welcomed. I think the AGU, DSU industry are a little concerned about the proposal that the regulator has, but from our perspective, it's certainly a move in the right direction and to be welcomed. You're right about those won't have a big impact in terms of coming off network for manufacturers. It's only whenever a manufacturer becomes energy independent that becomes a big issue, and there is a requirement in our view that there's an alteration to the license, the transmission and distribution license for NIE, to protect all customers should someone come off the grid, that the cost that NIE would have achieved, or the price that NIE would have achieved, the payment they would have achieved from that isn't actually spread across all other consumers, and we believe that that's something that is possible.
How would you achieve that? Because I can understand why you would want that to be the case, but what mechanisms would there be to prevent the burden of network charges being pushed on to everyone else?
Well, it is a requirement. There will be a requirement to change the transmission and distribution licence. At the end of the day, NIE won't be running as much network, so surely the income that they achieve from that shouldn't be the same as well.
Okay, going to shift tack now and talk about water, because again it's in your manifesto. Action 1, it talks about the, if I can, forgive me if I can find it here. All your members pay for water intake and discharge, but consistently NI Water overcharge or incorrectly bill customers. The regulator must resolve these continuing problems within the company. And I've experienced even this week, and a large employer in my constituency who will remain nameless for commercial reasons, of course. But their bill has went, for sewage service alone, their bill has went from 800 to 8,000 a month in one swoop. They've also, to add further injury, they've been given a retrospective bill of something like £80,000, dated back from September 13. Now, that's incredible that in this day and age something like that could happen. And that seems to be typical of a problem running right through both NI Water and industry. What's your view on it?
People are happy to pay for what they consume and happy to pay the fair price for that. I'm aware of that example that you're referring to, and this was a bill that arrived completely out of the blue, and actually seemed to be timed in a way to create some concern within that company, because there was about to be a review by NI Water themselves on the volumes, both in terms of intake and discharge. So it's interesting that they fired first and sent the bill, rather than actually getting the evidence and the facts correct. So I know that there's a dispute there on that. This isn't unusual for us. It isn't unusual in business. You'll be aware of the Consumer Council's work that they've done both for Altnagalvin Hospital and hairdressers here in East Belfast and in other locations that have got a lot of money back. Certainly, we have a number of examples, or I've heard a number of examples where what people are being billed doesn't necessarily reflect what their consumption is. Another small one, there's a major manufacturer in the northwest who has 2 intakes, but they've one overall water consumption and discharge. But because they've got 2 intakes, they get 2 separate bills, and the volumes of those 2 separate bills come under different bands, which means that they're actually paying about £50,000 more than what they should be paying for one single supply. And when they've approached NI Water about this, to paraphrase a television programme, the computer says no. They couldn't join the 2 individual items up. So yeah, there are issues there. The regulator's own price control on NI Water says it was 30% less efficient than a comparable company in GB. There's been very good work done there. Again, that's to be congratulated by NI Water and the regulator. But there's very, very much more to be done.
You bring on to my last question around the metering, the multiple meters in some businesses. How, both in practical terms and in billing terms, can that be prevented? Obviously, it should be paid on consumption rather than a metered service. In practical terms, for maybe some large sites that have 2 inputs, how can that be reversed to one, and then how would that affect the bill?
Well, there may be large sites with different inputs, but they're one customer. And I think these gentlemen here and others that we represent understand that you bill your customer what they're due to be billed. It may be different parts of that business, but it's still one customer. And surely, whether it's an IT issue, whether it's someone looking at the big consumers and taking an interest in those from a client management point of view or whatever, certainly you should only be billing customers once for what they actually consume and not in any other format in our view.
Chair, just before I give up, can I just ask that we maybe write to the DRD Minister and the committee to ask him to investigate this issue, because
Well, I was just...
provide you details of
Yep.
the company to talk about.
Please do, Paul. I was just going to tease that out a wee bit further, because I've dealt with cases like this myself, and one successfully, no, not at the same scale as what you're referring to there, Paul, that one. Just to clarify what you're talking about, the one in the northwest that you referred to there, Stephen, 2 bills, if there's 2 meters, I presume there's two separate meters, 2 bills, maybe 2 separate meters, 2 different addresses, whatever it might be, 2 different roads into the place, whatever. But just to clarify, often these bills include a sewerage charge. Are you talking that in that case there's 2 meters charging for water intake and also a sewerage amount to it?
It's a tariff issue as well. So I think, Patsy, there's the practical aspect that, your overall consumption, you might be in a different tariff band.
Yes.
Whereas you've got 2 smaller intakes, so you're not, whilst your overall volume, getting into that next tariff band, because on the 2 meters you're beneath that, you're in the next
Yes.
tariff, a higher one. And the way the bills are done is, and these businesses, as well as a charge for your intake, there's then a proportional charge for any return through sewage. So you're picking that up twice.
Right, but that's
driven by
my
volume,
point.
Patsy, more than anything else.
Is there, without getting laboriously tied down in one particular case, you're getting 2 water connections coming in and 1 sewage exit, and yet you're getting 2 bills for the sewage. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the discharge is charged at a proportion of what
Yes.
you're taking, is rather than actually another meter at the discharge area. So
I appreciate that, but both bills contain the sewage element.
Yeah.
Yes, right, that's clear enough now. Just want to
And
get,
in this case, just for clarity, in this case it is one single contained site.
yes,
It isn't various different buildings spread across different parts of the town or city or whatever the case may be.
appreciate that, but there's obviously 2 water connections, 2 meters coming into it someplace. That's okay. That's grand, thank you. Mr. Dunn, Gordon.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, gentlemen, for coming in and making your presentation. In relation to rates, Stephen, you have mentioned in your report about the lack of certainty is holding back investment. It's a rather strong statement. Have you any evidence to add to that?
Yeah, we have. In arriving at this document, we went across the country, inviting both manufacturers and indeed MLAs and MPs from the area along. And on a number of those meetings that we had, was a number of the manufacturers that said, we intend to expand, but we need certainty in terms of what that's going to cost us in the long term. These are investments that are made for a 20-year period.
Okay.
These aren't investments that are made quickly and you can pass them on. If you're building an extension to your factory, you intend to stay in that location for a long period of time. So without naming the individual companies, Gordon, I'm happy to do that outside of evidence. But certainly there's a number of companies that we spoke to that said, please provide us, or please asking the Assembly to provide us with the clarity and certainty for the long term so that we have the confidence to go to the bank or other funders and go to the builder and actually get this done.
Okay, so the extension of industrial derating is critical, you reckon, to long-term viability of a lot of businesses?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing with manufacturing is, outside of any other part of the economy, it's very space. It needs a lot of space in terms of doing what they do. Certainly in one of the engagements that we were at in Fermanagh, we were with the old Fisher Engineering, which I'm sure you're very familiar with as well. And that is acres and acres and acres of space because they do big engineering. But you could have walked around there and not seen very many people. Whereas if you walk into an office or a shop or any other parts of the economy, you'll find people everywhere. Manufacturing needs a lot of space in order just to do the type of work that they do. So the work that this Assembly has done to provide industrial derating, they need to be congratulated for that, and we would hope that that would continue on in terms of the long term.
Okay. In relation to renewable energy, what's your attitude in relation to the 40% targets? Maybe we should push forward on those.
We have no objection to the 40% target, provided it's proven to be cost effective. Certainly we have an opportunity here on one level in terms of creating a renewables industry, both in and around Belfast Port, but other parts of the industry as well. One of our members just this week began constructing their own 250 megawatt generators. That's a new part of the industry and is to be very much welcome. We also have an opportunity in terms of servicing that industry also. So there is no objection to renewables, absolutely not. But what we do object to is the renewables getting and achieving payments that they don't necessarily deserve, some of which the committee picked up in terms of their report on energy prices. And certainly, if these generators are to be there for the long term, they should be able to compete on an equal footing with all other generators, ensuring the customers achieve a reasonable price from that market.
You do recognise there are a number of manufacturers and suppliers involved in the renewable industry here?
Oh, absolutely, and I mentioned some of those already, and there's others who've
I
set
don't
up
see it.
businesses.
I don't see a lot of it renewable in relation to your report, but
Well,
perhaps.
we talk about a centre of excellence in that section.
Okay. Right. Moving on, the skills gap, Con. Perhaps you could come in here. A number of us have been to Harland and Wolff, and I think we recognise the excellent job that you're doing. Can you give us any information in relation to the skills programme that you were involved in there? I understand it was a success.
Thanks, Gordon. We had worked with Dell on this new approach to the academy. There are, I think, we had 17 people who we put through the first phase of it. 5 of them are in employment with us now. We have another 5 coming in on Monday, I believe, the way we do it, Gordon, is spend the amount of time in the 2 technical colleges. They then move in and do 2 to 3 weeks with ourselves on a finalisation, and essentially doing longer and more complex weld runs. And at the end of that, they're assessed. So we would hope to start the next batch, I say, on Monday, and then there's a final batch to come in just to make sure we've got everybody up to speed on their welding capability. We would certainly like to see that programme then a further phase extended, not just on welding, but on potentially other trades such as pipe fabrication, etc., steelwork, and to try and build up a base. But also we'd like to see it rolled out across the province. I know Stephen has been speaking to a number of our members, both in Mid-Ulster, South Derry, etc., about linking in with the regional colleges in their areas and trying to get a similar approach to that, because it certainly seems to be a good idea where the DEL budget has been used in this case to create a programme and sustain a programme that's suitable for the local businesses in that area. And I think we have a good link in, the work we've done with the 2 colleges in Newcastle and Belfast has been very good. I know there are similar programmes potentially can be done in South West Regional College in the various campuses, so I'd like to see more of those. It may be a small acorns, Gordon, but I think we have to start somewhere, improve the programme and then expand it, and we'd certainly like to do more work on it.
If I could maybe give another example on the back of that, Gordon, which would be useful for the committee. When we were going around the country and talking to manufacturers and MLAs and others about arriving at this document, I think, Pat, you were even at this meeting at SDC. There was an engineering firm in County Derry. They've one high school in that community. High school no longer done metalwork. So this is an engineering firm that depends on that local community and that school bringing young people out that have an interest in that area so that they have long-term sustainable employees coming through to ensure that they're sustainable in the long term themselves. But the school no longer does any metalwork. And that's a little example that's happening in many other parts of Northern Ireland that is a concern and might be useful.
So,
talking to Mark about
I was just going to call upon Mark there, because I know from visiting your place a number of occasions there have been issues around skills development. And maybe, Mark, we touched on it there and we had discussion down at SDC about this. You've brought us into that first thing, curriculum. Second thing, connectivity between the local schools and businesses so that they can get it into their heads. Look, this is a place where we can actually go. This is a place where we can get good and well-paid jobs. And then the third thing is the connectivity and the response of the local FE sector, where it'd be helpful if we could get some thoughts from yourself on that, Mark.
Yeah, thanks very much, Patsy. We've had a meeting last year and then a meeting the year before. I want to keep this positive. However, it seems to be ourselves, we're pushing for the colleges and everyone else to start programmes. And what I would like schools to be ringing every week saying, can we have visits? Can we maybe send some of our teachers? We're working with the Chamber of Commerce and we're working especially with business community, and we're taking some STEM teachers and they're coming for work placement for us. We're bringing the Bloodhound supersonic car and bringing it to one of the local schools. So we want engineering, people interested in engineering. So I think we're talking about an executive manufacturing strategy. We'd almost like, a joined up engineering education strategy. So we've got INI, we've got DEL, we've got the FE colleges. We would maybe like just one, in our case, it's just personally, one agency we can say, right, we want to work with you. We've started up our own training academy. It just seems to be too many agencies you're talking to at the minute.
Right.
That's our view.
Yeah, I think, Patsy, the feedback from members is, and of family experience on this as well in Mid-Ulsters, when you get everybody joined up and get it working, does work, does deliver what you can. It's, as Mark says, getting it there.
Yes.
And if we could focus in on that, then and get it working simpler. You know,
Right.
who do we talk to? Who's going to put all this together? I think that would be, you know, a great goal, a great achievement.
So that's back to Gordon's point on the strategic stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that, Gordon. I just wanted to make sure that we covered that
Can I
bit.
come in on the education side of that? Just
Yeah, I will, but want to
Yeah,
have
just-
Gordon continue.
yeah, just finish off.
and then-
No, appreciate that, and obviously, Mark, you're competing with Belfast and the large manufacturers who probably pay more or slightly more. And that's maybe an assumption on my behalf, but that has been the case. And perhaps are seen to be offering better opportunities in career development. So obviously those are issues you have to compete with.
Well, I can only tell from we benchmark our salaries, and we'd be at the higher end of the scale. Even if you look at our factories in the UK, we would pay more than Northern Ireland. You know, we think a lot of our staff. You know, what we've been trying to do is promote our business. You know, the last number of years is obviously we want to promote the product, but we also want to promote the business so we can get the right type of people. You know, we want to have manufacturing not as people see it as 19th century post. We want to see someone for the 21st century. So that's what we're trying to do, and this is what Manufacturing Northern Ireland is trying to do, is just to promote manufacturing as a career.
You know, I appreciate what you're doing, bringing in schools, bringing in teachers, getting the message out there, and getting people a real feel for what it is about. I think that's to be commended. I do, you know, recognise that the colleges have done a lot as well, and they're so willing to design courses to suit the customer. You know, and I think that's what is important. But I suppose what it's all about is joined up working between Dale and Derry and the various departments. But
Gordon, I think, I mean, that
No, those
that's
are
a
real
very good point.
challenges.
There's a lot of really good work that's going on. The secret now is to take that really good work and make sure that that's common right throughout the sector. I'm sure that if I brought 10 manufacturers here today and I said to them, who should you ask about supporting your workforce development, both in terms of encouraging people to be here plus the people that are there, you'd get 10 different answers. There isn't a single, certainly we were talking earlier, there's no real clarity. This is your point of entry and this is how you manage that whole process out. So that joined up between Invest, between Dell, between the colleges, between the schools, etc., 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 is a really important piece of work that this committee and others can do, because when it works really, really well, and it's a very, very big benefit.
It's not just the FEs. It's the example of the course that was mentioned earlier that Stephen coordinated with Dale and Queen's at Riddle College, the manufacturing course.
Just on that.
We sold that out to places not inside 24 hours, which says that there's a demand from local manufacturing businesses for that type of tailored course. What we're trying to work on now is to get more of those courses, because it was an opportunity for local manufacturers to develop. So once you get all the dots joined, the courses that we can put on are very good. And you know, one of our other members in the group, James McKeag, James has done a lot on leadership and trying to develop leadership. And that's one of the big key points we saw with the course up at Riddle Hall, was it's an opportunity to develop that level of leadership as well. So we've got to keep the focus on delivery on the ground.
Yeah, and just for the record, the importance for skills and for development and enhancements of skills to your industries, because this is all going on record. Just if you could, please.
Yes, it is important, Patsy, because what we can then do is we can bring in that talent and grow those manufacturing businesses. And I think, going back to Stephen's first point when he made, when we go back to the presentation we actually had by Daniel Crespo here, I think it was last year, the EU Director General, he set the target for us, saying, why isn't Europe going for 20% of GDP for manufacturing? And he wasn't just setting that as a big global European target, that had to be delivered at a local level. And we see the way we're going to deliver that is by small companies such as Niles or Mark's here, having the access to that pool of people that can help them grow their business.
Okay, thank you. Paul, brief one on
Yeah,
this.
just on that, I have my own view on this. I'm on a number of board of governors of schools, and I've got to the point where I believe you need to just cut out the middleman. And I've thought about, and I want your views on this, that there would be, if you like, a school in a certain area where it'd be surrounded by businesses, and some of those businesses then would be represented on the Board of Governors, like a non-executive Board of Governors, basically. Not through any other means of recruitment other than they're a local business. And that means then you could go in and actually advise the principal and teachers as to what their technology unit should look like, what's the equipment they should have in it, and basically how you get a pupil to be more employable. What would your views on that be?
There's another agency, CBI, is promoting their members to become school governors. I don't know what the uptake is, but I think that would be very useful, because very often, if you look at governors, Board of Governors, very often you will have maybe ex-teachers, lawyers, whatever, but people maybe in the industrial sector, manufacturing sector, quite possibly they haven't put the names up, but it just doesn't seem like a natural fit or an established fit.
For a businessman, it would be like watching paint dry. Most Board of Governors meetings, but if there was an attachment where a group of business people in that area were joined together and then could be used or could input into the Board of Governors to actually shape and mould the school into something different in the future, I think that's where we need to be.
No, I think that's an idea.
And where you have the Invest NIs and the other groups who may well not be clicking right or not doing it right, then you're cutting out that middle man.
Okay. So, but really, people can take individual initiatives, and you're reliant on, but what you're talking about is strategic development of all this stuff. If it's happening, say, down the creek, but not happening in Belfast somewhere, or Portadown, wherever it may be, then it really falls flat in its face.
And the manufacturers themselves need to make themselves available.
Yes.
Certainly, we would be approached by governors and other people putting events on and stuff, and we would reach out and try to get manufacturers recruited to go to careers days or whatever the case may be, and they don't always make themselves available, let's be honest. So it is a two-way process. But if one message came out here today is that everyone needs to work together on this, whether those are educationalists or whether those are manufacturers themselves, and the opportunities are there because the jobs are there.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Humphrey, William.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just commend the very point you've just made, Stephen? A lot of companies, including businesses in the community, who work very well with the Girls Model, who have a number of events each year in North Belfast that I attend, and they're excellent at that, so I would commend those companies who take part in that. Stephen, you mentioned a manufacturing strategy. Could I just say, in terms of manufacturing strategy, that strategy, I think, is something which cannot be delivered or achieved by yourselves working in partnership with DETI alone. Listening to the presentations and the questions and answers that have been given today, it would seem to me that at least DETI would need to be joined up with DRD, DOE and the DEL committee. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and indeed, if we were extending it even further, the Education Ministry as well. That's why this needs to be, William, a cross-cutting, all-encompassing strategy for the executive rather than a DETI strategy.
Yes.
Certainly, it probably has a neater home within DETI in terms of reporting on it, in terms of measuring against it. But certainly the manufacturers here today and the others that we represent, it isn't just about DETI, it is about DEL, it is about Department of Education. Some occasions it's about DARD, it is about DRD, in terms of roads and water, etc., etc. So this is something that cuts across pretty much most of what this House in its totality deals with. Absolutely.
In terms of transportation costs, which you mentioned, and you would think that fuel costs like energy costs should be coming down given the situation we face in terms of the price of oil at the moment, where there's been a significant reduction. You mentioned that in terms of shipping, I think you said 5 times more expensive to ship across the North Channel than it is to go across the English Channel. In terms of the situation there, is that due to competition you know, afloat at ports like Felixstowe or Dover or whatever, or is it more than that, do you think?
Certainly, this is something that's come out particularly from the people involved in the food industry. So they're manufacturing food here and they're going into the big supermarkets in GB. And the cost of actually transportating product from here to there is greatly impacted upon just the pure ferry charges in many ways. Their view is that there is a lack of competition. Their view is that there's much more competition on the English Channel, and that has driven down price, not just competition from ferry companies, but also other forms of transportation as well, both the Channel Tunnel, etc., etc. So we believe that it's something that this House could usefully look at, maybe not necessarily this committee, but certainly the cost of that travel between here and Scotland is something that the food manufacturers in particular flagging up to us has been a big issue.
Maybe just on that point, does Mr. Irwin, Niall, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be the same capacity on the Irish Sea as what there is on the English Channel, and I suppose that drives it. I suppose it's a chicken and egg situation. There probably isn't the same demand for extra capacity as what there would be on the other side. But it certainly is more costly. We have noticed that we don't ship into onto the continent at all, but we have priced it, and there is a disparity. It wouldn't be, I suppose, for us it's not a major problem, but I suppose that if you're taking the competitiveness of Northern Ireland as a whole, yes, it's a thing that would need to be looked at. I think it's another spanner in the toolbox, just as corporation tax is another spanner in the toolbox. That's all it is. But it's to be strived at for the good of Northern Ireland, PLC as a whole, and that's really what we're here for.
No, thanks, Chair.
Sorry, William.
Stephen, when you say you would want, perhaps something the Assembly can look at, I mean, what do you think the Assembly in that context? Take for example air connectivity, which the Minister mentioned when she was here last week. The Minister's working hard to build up the number of international flights leaving Aldergrove to go to wherever. But there realistically, there's only so much government can do there without giving incentivisation. Is that what you're suggesting?
No, not necessarily. There may actually be opportunities there in terms of other operators that can be encouraged from a ferry travel point of view. And actually, sometimes just putting a spotlight on these issues actually flags up opportunities that you didn't necessarily believe that existed in the first place. But certainly, the manufacturers are saying to us that this is a big cost. It's impacting their ability to compete in GB and then onwards to Europe. Certainly a lot of product is actually leaving Northern Ireland to continental Europe through the Republic of Ireland and bypassing GB completely. So that limits our port capacity, or limits the trade going through our ports, etc., etc., etc. So certainly it's not the biggest issue that we have. Let's be absolutely clear about this. It is something that members are asking us to flag as an issue that needs to be resolved.
Well,
I think the road haulage industry would be the one
yes, I'm just going to make that point. Yeah,
to talk on that.
Yes. I'm hugely sympathetic because for 16 years when I worked in the private sector, that was one of the costs, and geography puts us at a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm hugely sympathetic to the point you're making. In terms of the A5 and A6 and the planning appeals and so on, have you had meetings with the Minister in DOE to try and push these forward?
This document is today is the first showing of this document, and it will form the agenda for our organisation.
Okay.
Just to be clear, this is our document. This isn't anybody else's in many respects. So this is our agenda going forward, and we will be seeking meetings with the Minister and others. We have examples where I would have manufacturers here looking to expand their operations, and they're looking for available space. And the single biggest issue that comes back all the time is that space needs to be near the transportation infrastructure that we have. So, for instance, one particular manufacturer, to double their space, they're looking to increase their production by 80% this year, which is a great news story. And they were looking for additional space, and we kind of looked around and asked around, and there was stuff available up in the northwest and other places, and they said, no, this needs to be near the roads infrastructure for us. So that's begun to really flag up to us the importance of the Moneynick, which is ready to go in many respects if it received funding, and the importance of the A5 in terms of continuing that road.
Have you done any work in terms of what the opportunity cost is of these infrastructural improvements, like the A5 and the A6, not going ahead? And not, in terms of the cost to companies now or in the future? Have you any?
Well, we do have examples where the existing road infrastructure hasn't been made available in some respects to people trying to get product to market. And I know that the Minister had meetings yesterday with one particular manufacturer on that issue. So, yes, there are implications, there are cost implications, there's implications in terms of where capital actually finds itself, or where the investment for that capital is put in place. It would be something that would be very positive in terms of regional development across Northern Ireland. Manufacturing is largely not based in Belfast. About 70% of manufacturing is outside of Belfast. So they're very, very dependent on good roads infrastructure in terms of getting product to them and product shipped from them.
Finally, can I ask you then, in terms of supportive regime with Transport NI, which point 3 in the actions under infrastructure, what does manufacturing NI envisage this looking like?
Well,
and if I might ask, are they not supportive at the moment?
Well, I can only go with another example that we have, and I briefly mentioned it there. We have one member who is looking to ship some material to Warren Point. They're based in the Mid-Ulster area. The natural way would be through Moneynick, down the M2, through Belfast, down the A1, getting to Warren Point Port and getting that product then to GB. They weren't permitted to take the motorway route, and instead were directed up the A and B roads, going in through Armagh and Donegal and a whole raft of other provincial towns with this big, cumbersome product. And that just seems nonsense to me, that the roads infrastructure that we have wouldn't be permitted to be used. The argument was, and I don't think it was the Transport NI specifically, but the contractor that they have managing those motorways, the issue was around bridges and stuff. So instead of sending them around motorway structurally sound bridges on motorways, we were directing them down country roads with brick bridges that maybe are 150 years old in some places, or longer or older. So there are kind of really practical things that are inhibiting manufacturers getting product to market that are in and around the roads infrastructure, and how they're able to use that roads infrastructure as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay. Gordon, you had a brief query on the back of what William was on there, had you?
No, I'm okay, thanks.
All right. Dead on.
All right, no.
Great. Mr. Kinahan.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you. And in all my time in Stormont, I've longed to see lists of actions rather than strategies. So wonderful to see. If I could start on education, we need to get you in front of the Education Committee to get the joined up thing there, and I'll do my best to get that there. I know we struggle with resources on Sentinels, don't get as much as they would like. And I think STEM is only touching a few, but if we can get there and really push it, I'll do my best. What I wanted to ask first was, in one of your comments, is Actions 7 under infrastructure, a single, central and accountable regime. When I read through all this, I was thinking, how on earth do we get it all to actually happen? We don't seem to have think tanks, we don't seem to have a private group. Is there something that you think we should be setting up as a driving force that pulls together all the departments and takes each action then takes a step-by-step approach through.
Danny, this is a piece of work that the CBI in particular have been concentrating on, which is there's lots of infrastructure projects, whether those be roads or schools or whatever, that are planned, and they go through the processes and they're taken so far, but then the whole thing begins to stall. And part of that is because there's duplication and communication across delivery bodies, both centrally and within the departments. Our view is, which we share the view of the CBI, is that a single central delivery body where the minister certainly can stand up and decide what's spent on his or her budget and decide what are the priorities and decide which projects come first and the speed at which those projects happen. But then that goes to, as you would have in a business, another group, and their job is to make sure that this happens quickly, efficiently, effectively, expediently. And we certainly believe that that's something that would save a significant amount of money, firstly, and secondly would speed up the whole process of making sure that there are infrastructure construction projects on the ground very quickly.
Okay, I mean, that's really just what I wanted to emphasise. We've all then got to push for it. When it comes to corporation tax, one under your actions in finance and taxation, in number 3, says corporation tax powers can be supercharged by lobbying Westminster for changes. What other extra fiscal matters can you see being put in place, whether we're borrowing from Irish ideas or European? Are there key ones that we're missing?
I'm not a tax expert or an accountancy expert for that matter, and I'm kind of looking for support around the table here. But
I think one of the view there reflected when we were speaking to a number of members and going back, I suppose members have a memory of a different capital allowance regime that was in place a number of years ago. There have been changes to that, industrial buildings allowance regimes, etc. So I think what members were really saying was some of those items they felt were valuable, so can we not also have those as well? And that's really where the whole document reflects views of members across the province, and members were certainly saying, look, in bygone years we had various tax allowance regimes around capital and buildings. They're not the same as they used to be. Can we revisit that?
And just as a little example of that, the whole hope and expectation of this House and everyone else and what manufacturers want to be able to do also is that what savings may come from a discounted rate on corporation tax, that those savings are ploughed back into the business, and that those that funding that becomes internally available is actually used to increase space, increase productivity, increase employment, increase wealth, both for the company and the people that work there. If we're able to have an adjustment in terms of capital allowance changes, it makes that funding more likely to come back in. So some people understand that to make a capital investment in a piece of machinery or equipment, that's written off in terms of their balance sheet across a period of 30 years, 20 years, whatever the case may be. But they actually have that congested down into a much tighter period, so that you're writing that off against your capital allowance is written off in a shorter period, whether that be 1 year, 3 years or 5 years. That makes it more likely that that investment has to be put in to ensuring that saving on corporation tax is turned into capital investment in the either in the product, the service or the space that they're manufacturing in.
Okay, thank you. I think we need to take those on board. When you read what the chair has referred to as the research paper, what really shocked me there when we were looking at Ireland was that some of the changes started in 1958 before they really kicked in. There's a long way to go on all of this, and thank you. One thing that isn't in your list of actions, and this is my last question, is procurement. And when we were in Scotland with the Education Committee, they had cleverly set up hub companies at a very high level who then competed under EU regulations for who got the contract, but then they were able below that to pass all their contracts to small local companies. And that just seemed really good, but you haven't got sort of procurement. It's in under some of the other headings, but that's something you've got to get quicker and better at.
Well, absolutely. And to be clear, we're not. There's a number of business organisations in Northern Ireland, and we try to let them do what they do. So the CPI and the IOD and the Chambers of Commerce, etc., will all have their own particular areas of work and interest, and we concentrate on that cost of doing business piece largely.
Great. Thank you. Really good paper. Thanks.
Okay. Tuasal O'Muller, Martin.
Gurmaigat Patsy. Gentlemen, and very male-oriented presentation today on our side as well. So, except for Ms. Devlin, we apologise for that, because I see in these powerhouse economies that manufacturing actually has been a great way for careers for women as well.
And that's in our document as well.
Good. I enjoyed the document. It's very and the bit of the presentation that I heard, and we appreciate the upbeat attitude that you're displaying here. And I want to thank you and congratulate you for your own contribution as business leaders and as manufacturers. I'm certainly more familiar with Mr. Irwin's products than maybe some of the rest. But I think we're on the same side. We like you coming in with fairly sharp, short shopping list. But two things maybe you could help us with. Firstly, those of us who believe that the introduction of corporation tax has the potential to open up a whole new era of job creation. I'd like to hear from you where that would be, where are the sectors in which we could increase our activity, grow the number of jobs, be more successful in. You mentioned earlier about the great hope that we have that the additional profits that companies make, if they are a profit, that they'll be ploughed back in. But how could that happen, and what are the areas we should focus on? And in that respect, this gives us an opportunity to internationalise our businesses, because the prospect of having a tax equalisation of 12.5% tax, I think would be very attractive to American companies, attractive to companies in the South, attractive to companies in Europe who want to partner up with some of our local companies. So I wanted to know if you've given any thought, and this would be helpful to those of us who are arguing, saying, okay, let's see how we develop the argument around corporation tax, what we really need on our side. Someone mentioned the word to turbocharge or to drive forward, as we need an idea of the benefits beyond that nebulous idea that we ploughed back in. So that for me is very, very important. The second area, and Mr. Kinnan touched upon it, about education and skills, is I wonder if it's possible to set a target. You've asked us to set a target, or maybe all of us together, move from 12.5% to 20% of GDP. We talk about 80,000 jobs. No one's put a figure on what 20% would be in terms of jobs, but it might be useful if we had a target that we are looking for sustainable, well-paid manufacturing jobs into the future. If corporation tax comes in, as is being suggested in 2017, where would be that target? Can we get to 100,000 jobs? When will we get there? Would it be 90,000 jobs? And I think that target would be useful not only for us, but for your sector and your industry. So, don't you want to come back on any of that?
I'll maybe kick off on that. In terms of your second point first, we've been very careful not to put a target, not to put a number on that. I think that very many business organisations and others go, there's 50,000 jobs here, there's 30,000 jobs there, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think people begin to not believe sometimes the numbers that are being put out there. So we're not in the business of putting numbers out that we can't absolutely stand over ourselves. So we've deliberately not done that. And certainly, if you look at the employment levels currently, and you grew the manufacturing sector significantly, as we hope that this House and others would share our ambition to do that, then undoubtedly jobs come with that. And the one thing about manufacturing jobs are they're in every constituency in Northern Ireland. This will benefit Fermanagh as much as it benefits Belfast city centre, and that's not to be overlooked. So it may be something that the committee themselves may look at in terms of, well, if we did have 20%, what would that mean in terms of jobs and the size of our economy, et cetera, et cetera. But we're not in the business of putting those numbers out there deliberately. In terms of where...
Does Mr. Irwin agree with that? Does think there shouldn't be targets in it? Would you targets? We've all targets in our own businesses of some type. You need to throw us a lifeline here, because where people are saying, what's going to happen with corporation tax? We're going to say it's going to increase jobs. Somebody needs to say where they're going to be, and here's a target, and that's
I
what
can give you some examples of the same.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to have a target. I suppose it's something that we have generally stayed away from. In that, as things change, job attractions can call for different numbers of jobs, but I think that we would prefer to stay away from making a comment on that.
Thank you.
Our basis really as a group was to try and focus on individual items and really target that. We haven't, whilst we're very supportive of what the guys in the corporation tax have done, we have tried to focus our group and our resources on other aspects. Okay. So it's not that I think the boys don't want to answer your question. I just think it's not something that we've focused our time on. We've tried to focus in on issues that we feel we can deliver on. But I do see it, as I think as Niall used the expression earlier on, it's another spanner in the toolbox. And as we move Northern Ireland out to a more export focused economy and continue to try and drive that forward as we try and create jobs in the economy, then the more spanners we have in the toolbox, the better. Because all the other competing regions are going to be trying to catch up with us.
If I could just march in with this, maybe the question is, do you see the reduction in corporation tax as a significant lever or an item in the toolbox that's going to help you increase jobs at your respective firms?
I think yes. I think it's one of those issues, and others such as Eamon Donnelly and whatnot have done tremendous work on this yes. area and have access to a whole bank of information that we don't. But for individual businesses, corporation tax is quite similar to the argument and the situation we found ourselves in many years ago, in that what the rates legislation that we currently have in allows us to do is to retain some element of the money that we do make to make ourselves more competitive and plough that back into the business. And certainly I would see the same thing with the corporation tax.
And if I give one example, Martin, which would be probably pretty helpful. We have a member in engineering in that heartland in Mid-Ulster who they're owned by a North American company. They have two main production facilities. Centres, a centre in Northern Ireland and a centre in North America. The news that the corporation tax setting powers may come here has already sparked a conversation internally within that organisation, which could result, in the managing director's view, in doubling the production capacity here in the north, and in turn doubling the employment. The parent company, the main host in North America, they're already beginning to plan should corporation tax powers be permitted here or accepted here and set here. So if that's just one example, that's FDI, but not the traditional knowledge or understanding of FDI. That isn't a new business arriving. That's a business who is here and receiving FDI internally within their own organisation. And
can you give us
employment?
Some sort of an indication, ballpark figure, doesn't have to be specific.
Well, that one company, that will be the equivalent of another 300 jobs, and that's just that one company.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry, Martin, Lannery. Okay.
No, I mean, well, I'm saying this, first of all, I see you represent quite a lot of Indigenous manufacturers, and we really have great respect for that, because some of our friends and we have many friends who their headquarters are in Chicago and New York, often you just really can't get your hands around them, and they are subsidiaries, so we really want to get behind our Indigenous industries and our Indigenous businesses. And I'm saying this to all our friends when we do IoT and CBI and Grow NI and so on. Guys, if we go in and we pitch for this, that we need to see that businesses respond as well and send the balls in our court as we can do. Certainly we need to get our infrastructure sorted. It's a disgrace that we still don't have the A6 road sorted out, and we need to go back to the Minister on that again and again and again. The energy prices are deliberately bewildering, and that's a burden on us all as well.
If you had a spare week, it could take you through it sometime.
Well, I believe they had a spare year they went through it. And the deindustrialisation, the rates and the rate rebate for industry, they're all very important. But I think what you're saying to us is you're also, you're here to do more than that. If we do our bit, and you're paying for much of this, of course, through your taxes and rates and so on. But if we do our bit, you'll do your bit. And what I would say to all our colleagues and businesses, we need to put some meat in that bone. We need to really say, okay, this is where we think we can go 2017 to 2020. So we're in this together. I say that as a partner to all you're trying to achieve.
And the purpose of this document is the worlds have joined there, which is very useful to us in terms of timing. The committee have launched this inquiry. This document is about, in a post-corporation tax or even pre-corporation tax era, what needs to be happening to really help build this economy. Our focus is on manufacturing businesses, and the big thing that comes back from them is the cost of doing business, and that's what our proposals are on. Others will have other areas that they'll focus upon.
Sorry, we have a factory in UK and a factory in Northern Ireland. So we sort of, when we look about where we're going to invest, our heart would very much say, right, we want to invest in Mid-Ulster, whereas your head would sometimes say, right, Mansfield and Nottingham, there's a lot of reasons for development there. So what we're trying to do with this policy, I think it quite, personally, is if we can get the cost base down in Northern Ireland so that your head then says, I want to base and I want to expand Northern Ireland, that's where we want to be.
No, we understand that. That's why some of us are going to be pitching for corporation tax to be reduced as well. If we could do that, then that would be another attraction to it. But we really do. We understand this. We appreciate it, and the committee's much more experience of it than I have.
Just one brief thing while we're on corporation tax. Your action point 2, the executive should use its corporation tax powers to support not only international selling in Northern Ireland, but to support investment in indigenous manufacturing businesses. Do you want to expand a wee bit on that for the record, just when we're here?
I think that a lot of the commentary around the potential to set corporation tax powers here is about the tool that becomes in terms of a marketing tool for InvestNI and for Northern Ireland to sell this place for FDI investment. This has real benefits, which I'm sure you'll hear from Federation of Small Business, which I'm sure you'll hear from Pubs of Ulster and from NERTA and others. This is real benefits for companies that are here already. And we should, if we get these powers and we do set, which of course we would encourage, a rate or signal what that rate's going to be very quickly. If we do that, we've got to make sure that we promote this in terms of benefits for people who are already here, not just simply have our eye on the ball of a potential marketing tool.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for that, Steve. Mr. Flanagan, Phil.
Thanks, Patsy, and thanks for your presentation. It's a very useful report for us to study, and I'm hopeful that we'll adopt some of the recommendations and actions you see in it, both in terms of this committee report, but also in future assembly and executive actions. I want to give you some information on overcharging and on the charging of water for your own information. Between 2008 and 2014, 6,705 commercial organisations were overcharged for water to the tune of £2.18 million. In the same period, 2,767 commercial accounts were undercharged to the tune of £4.5 million, and 136,000 of that was written off. Now, the Minister says that this work is continuing and further account corrections are to be expected. But I think when you see figures like that and the ability of NI Water to have 100% clawback, where is the incentivisation for NI Water to accurately bill customers if they have up to 6 years to go back and claw back any money that they didn't charge customers? So I certainly think that's an issue that we need to take forward with the department and the committee, because for me that's not good enough performance for NI Water. I don't even want to get into the whole issue of electricity and energy, because we produced what I think are 3 very good reports on the issue, and in my opinion our recommendations have been largely dismissed out of hand. I don't think they've been given the credence that they deserved, and the scale of the issue I don't think has been acknowledged by either department or the utility regulator at this stage. So I want to move on to the wider manufacturing sector. I spend an awful lot of time on the road travelling up and down to this place. And I've noticed a considerable increase in the number of lorries and vans coming out of Fermanagh, particularly those from places like Tracy Concrete, from Aaron Cast and from the Quinn Group. And these are travelling along the M1 and the A4, which even neglected to call for its upgrading, but I think it needs to be upgraded from Ballygolly to Sligo. But is that an indicator that the manufacturing sector is growing, that it's performing well, that there is an increase in the number of vans and lorries transporting goods on our roads?
Short answer, yes. As someone who was stuck at Moneynick this morning counting white vans, and on my way home tonight I'll be counting the white vans as well at the end of the M2. It certainly is an indication of the health of the economy, is the number of people who are transporting goods. It was amazing being in Germany as part of that programme that Con referenced earlier on, and just see the amount of manufacturing product that's moving about. With the European Business School on the banks of the Rhine, there wasn't a minute that passed, there wasn't a boat transporting some material up and down the River Rhine. There's a motorway right in front of it. It's full of lorries transporting manufactured product, north, south, east and west. And then behind the university there's a rail line that had a few commuter trains, absolutely. The majority of the stuff that was being transported was manufactured product or raw material being taken to manufacturers. Manufacturing represents about 27% of the German economy. That's an ambition that would really transform this place. The ambition that Europe has, that it should be 20%, is something that we think, because it's a European target, that we really should aim for ourselves. But yeah, the amount of vans and lorries that are on the roads is a good, healthy indicator of how well things are doing, or otherwise, as the case may be. Now, unfortunately, particularly for the building sector, a lot of those vans may be dropping people to Belfast International and Belfast City Airport. They go to jobs and contracts in GB or elsewhere. And that should be a concern for this committee as well, is that we try to make sure that those manufacturing skills in particular are retained and used to our own benefit here.
I know plenty of people that's at it. Flying out on Sunday night, flying back on a Friday evening, and it really has a detrimental impact on the social aspect of the people we represent, but also the economy. In terms of the need to tackle regional disparities, and I know you have a personal interest as well as a commercial interest in this, and we all know that manufacturers do create an awful lot of jobs outside of Greater Belfast in rural communities where you'll not get a computer programming company to base themselves. And we can't expect everybody to go and do a degree in coding or computer programming and move to Belfast. What support can we bring forward to specifically help manufacturers create more jobs in rural communities where immigration and people abandon rural communities to move to either Belfast or overseas is a serious problem at the minute?
Maybe pass that on to Niall and Mark. Heard a lot from me.
Okay, Niall.
Gee, thanks. I think that I suppose joined up thinking is the biggest, will be the biggest helper there. I suppose joined up thinking as far as education is concerned, and prevent duplication of effort in that joined up thinking. And I suppose encouragement, I suppose physical encouragement, you know, members being available for companies, I suppose general publication. Look, Northern Ireland's manufacturing sector wants to do the job. You guys have in the past given us great hope. I suppose the biggest hope was whenever you answered the call about industrial rates. It's tremendous. I think that the vibrancy of Northern Ireland as a place, it's tremendous, and I think that we've got something here that other regions will won't be able to get, and we get it because we're small, we can talk to each other, we can get things done. And I just think that the biggest thing that this House can do to help rural activities is to be there, be accessible, and to encourage it. We have something tremendously special here in Northern Ireland, and we as manufacturers get great hope from the response from the members in this House. It is to be treasured, and I think it's a wonderful organisation. And I suppose the biggest thing the House can do is to keep on encouraging, keep on being available, and you'll be surprised what happens. Don't think we need to do anything, world breaking. Northern Ireland has the heart to deliver. Just help it. That's all we can do.
Yeah, we think it's just the same as, very much so the same as Niall. I think now we've got our assembly, we've got a direct link. I've got mobile numbers for a number of MLAs. So the engagement, that it's really important to us. Maybe in the past, our own business, we've sort of just kept doing what we're doing. We haven't really engaged too much, and we talk about social responsibility. We've realised that we have to improve engagement with yourselves, the schools, the universities, invest in NI. So really, we're excited what's going to happen in the future. And, we just want to promote manufacturing. As I said before, we want to promote it as a career, want to promote it as an industry. We don't want to put numbers how many jobs we want to promote, but if you look what we have at the minute at 12.5%, and you look where 20% gets us, I want to strive for that. We've created 300 jobs in the last 3 years. We want to keep on doing that, and we thank you for all the support you've given us over the last 3 years, 4 years since the recession.
And have you taken a position on what the impact of the North being dragged out of Europe would have on your members?
I'm sorry, Phil, can you repeat that?
Do you want time to think about an answer, do you?
No, I genuinely could. I'm dosed with a cold here.
I noticed. In terms of the prospect of the North being dragged out of the Europe by the British government, have you taken a position on what impact that would have on your members yet?
It's not something, Phil, that we've thought about.
Okay.
We could certainly see that for those members of export, it could become an issue for us. I know for organisations such as my own, even the recent change in the GBP euro rate has impacts on us. So it's a difficult one, but it's not one that we've sat down and talked about as a group.
Okay. Is it something that you might do ahead of the forthcoming election?
We'll need to take a view on it, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Finally, can I ask you about what level of engagement you have with manufacturing organisations that aren't actually based here, in terms of the level of contact that Invest NI have with potential manufacturing companies? Because what I'm hearing is that Invest NI don't bother trying to get manufacturing companies here due to the uncompetitive cost of energy. Have you any evidence that is the case, or are Invest NI trying to attract manufacturing companies in here?
We don't know what Invest NI are doing in terms of that. We don't engage with any organisations outside of this place. We are a membership-based organisation. We're a campaign rather than another CBI in many respects. So we don't have that engagement. We're not part of the marketing tool for Northern Ireland. That may annoy some people at times, that we say things that appear to be counterproductive. We're here to represent our members, as you all are, in terms of representing your own constituency as well. So we're not afraid to say what people are hurting about. Certainly, if you're asking me if I were an executive for Invest NI, knowing the cost base that we have here, would I be knocking on doors with big manufacturers elsewhere in the world? I probably wouldn't receive much of a response when I got there. Energy's largely the third or traditionally the third largest input cost in terms of any manufacturing facility, and the prices that they're sitting at the moment, despite drops in global commodity prices, every other part of the world are achieving those same benefits at the same time. So it's very unlikely that we would be attractive to there. We do have members that have chosen other parts of GB or indeed the island of Ireland and located or extended manufacturing plants in those locations because of the pure cost of the energy. When they sit down with a piece of paper and a spreadsheet and they work out what's the short, medium and long-term benefits of any particular location, they have chosen other locations rather than here.
And do you think if, in a hypothetical situation where corporation tax was reduced to 12.5%, but energy still remained as uncompetitive as it is at the minute, that it would become much more attractive for potential manufacturing investors to locate here, or would they still be put off by the high cost of energy?
I think, Phil, the reality is that the lower corporation tax will make us that part of the calculation more attractive. I don't think we should sit here and just accept what the cost of energy is today. I think we have to go out and try and come up with alternative ways of doing that and get a similar cost advantage over time on that as well, so that we just don't accept the status quo. We've got to challenge it and go out there, and if we have to shake it up a bit and try and get that competitive, and hopefully we'll get the announcement on the corporation tax. If we get a couple of the other levers, then what that does is make us more attractive in the first place to those of us that are here, to expand and grow our businesses, and also for those that might come and join us.
Domestic consumers and small businesses, who make up the vast majority of the headcount in terms of electricity customers, are at the middle of where Europe is, whereas the people who are consuming most of the energy are at the wrong end of the scale. Why can't both be in the middle? Why can't we both be in a European? If we're able to achieve that for
Well, there needs to be
small business and
acceptance
domestic
from some people
consumers.
there's a problem first.
Sorry?
There needs to be an acceptance from some people that there's a problem first. Every time we raise it, we're told that there isn't a problem.
Well, in recent correspondence that we've had from the Minister, there has been an acceptance that there are issues for large energy consumers, to be fair.
Okay.
Welcome development.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Can I just...
Yes, Gordon?
amend the point. Stephen, you mentioned about Invest NI. I apologise, I was out there and missed probably the question. But you do recognise that Invest NI exceeded their targets in the past year. You do recognise the good work, and I take it you've met the Chief Executive?
Yeah.
So you have engaged with them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And maybe you were out at the room at the time, but I've
Yeah.
said that that's a very much improving
You did.
relationship. Certainly the issues around the target that was missed in terms of manufacturing exports should be concern for this committee and others. The number of manufacturers that are exporting is down. The latest numbers have some skewness in there with a couple of big orders as well, which should be a concern also. But also as a major concern, and it formed the basis of the engagement that we had with the Chief Executive, was the money that Invest NI have in their budget from their uncommitted pot of money goes to support the types of things that really make a difference to manufacturers and other local Indigenous businesses. On the face of it, Invest NI look like they're getting more money from the last budget, but largely that's to pay for jobs that have been bought but not paid for yet. There's a reduction in that core uncommitted pot, which supports businesses around this table, that will have an impact on energy efficiency, on lean manufacturing, on skills development, etc., etc., etc. And the committee should be concerned, in our view, that Invest NI are receiving the right level of funding in the right parts of their budget, not just an overall number, which largely makes up the commentary around the budget that they've achieved.
Okay, no doubt they could improve, but I think, even the representatives that are here today, I'm sure, have received support from Invest NI. It is no doubt a challenge in business.
We've said that there's
competitiveness of it all.
We want to see them well resourced in order to continue what they're doing. Absolutely.
And you did put
Just
that
want
on
to put on
record.
record that both Minister Foster and Alistair Hamilton helped us out when we were in the Middle East 2 weeks ago. They were part of our launch in the Middle East. So, no, we appreciate the work Invest.NI does.
I think I recognised a voice on the radio about that.
Thanks very much.
That's
Thanks,
all
Chair.
Barry Turley's fault, but anyway.
So, gentlemen, thanks very much again for your time and effort. And just one wee thing, perhaps you would encourage, there's been a survey has been sent out through SurveyMonkey. If you could encourage your membership to participate in that whenever
Well,
you get
we have shared it, your committee clerk has shared it with me, and we've shared it to our membership, and we'll continue to do that. What's the deadline just on that now?
10th of March. 10th of March.
Okay, well, we'll do it again between now and then.
That's great. Thanks, Stephen. See you later on then. Okay, thank you. All the best in the meantime.
Thanks very much.
Now, next item is agenda item number 5. That's the Assembly Research Briefing case study on FDI. Now, because of the pressures of time here today, and given that this is, I have to say, this is a really, really good document. I want to give it justice, so I want to hold it over to next week, given the pressures of time on it. 3rd of March. It'll be next week. The 3rd of March. And I'd like to compliment you in advance. It's a very, very easily read document with the right stuff in it. So thank you for that in the meantime. So we'll see you on the 3rd then, Ian. Thank you. Next item is agenda number 6, Insolvency Amendment Bill, scrutiny of the bill. Papers to this item include a departmental response to committee queries in relation to the Honourable Mr Justice Deeney's comments on the insolvency bill and the backlog of insolvency cases, the clause-by-clause table for the bill, page 69, an update of clause 13 in the table that's tabled. The response includes a copy of the proposed amendment to clause 13 to be brought by the department at consideration stage. So, if members are content with the proposed amendment to clause 13, agree. The committee has previously noted that the examiner of statutory rules has advised amendments to clause 11, which was agreed by the committee and by the department. The text of that amendment isn't available, but should be available next week. So, if members are content to defer formal clause-by-clause consideration until next week, when the committee will have had time to consider the text of the amendment to clause 11. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agenda item number 8, that's matters arising. Papers for this item are from page 107 to 118. Okay. So, there's one item in the matters arising on page 106 which has been marked for discussion. Now, that relates to the issues around the alternative dispute resolution. Now, on this, given that we had, whenever this issue arose before, we had thought about the Consumer Council and the role that they were performing in this. So, would members be happy in the first instance, just before we come to any formalised conclusion on this, to share the response with the Consumer Council and ask them for their thoughts on this?
What number are you on there?
Tab 11.
The page 106 onwards, Gordon.
Thank you.
Yes, and this is the alternative dispute resolution issue.
Right.
It's on page 107. So what I was suggesting is, because it raises issues around potentially consumer-related matters, that we share the response with the Consumer Council and ask them for their thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Aye.
Sounds
Agreed?
good.
Okay, thank you. Now, then at page 116, there's a draft response to the issue that was raised last week on the OFM DFM committee on the EU Commission programme 2015. Needed 2014. You never know the way things are there. So, okay. So, are members content with the draft response there? Suggested action. Okay.
Great.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you. And if members are also content with the suggested actions for their main item.
Also, just in terms of
Well-
8.5 there, the resolution for and I about their price cuts. Can we write to the regulator and ask them if they've given any consideration to reviewing how Power and I adopt their hedging strategy? Because it's nearly a year since wholesale prices started to fall and the
Yes.
price of electricity through the single electricity market started to fall, and I'd like to get a written response from...
Well, I don't want to cut you short, but the utility regulator's in next week.
but they don't answer questions, Patsy. I'd like it in written so that members have time to study it.
Aye, but she'll be in next week, and, well, we can forward that along to her as an
No,
item.
I'd like to do it in writing, because hedging is quite a complex matter.
Right.
And I'd like to get a proper response.
So-
one that we have time to reflect on.
Well, what do I say? I'm just wondering, we send that off.
But it doesn't need to be back for next week, Patsy.
Right, no, I'm thinking if we had an informed response back from the utility regulator to raise and pursue those issues in a bit more depth with her, you know,
Right,
for
okay.
next week. If you get where I'm going.
Yeah.
We can write the letter off, surely, but it's getting the response back in time for that.
But I'm not even dying in the ditch about having it for next week.
Aye.
But I would like a proper response from the regulator about, because we have a number of useful research documents that Aidan carried out during one of the previous inquiries about their hedging strategy. But I'd like to find out from the regulator what consideration they have given, because it's a long time since the price of electricity through the single electricity market started to fall. And Power and I are only going to start reducing their prices from the 1st of April. And I don't see the need for such a lengthy delay. If prices were going up, I think the move would have been made an awful lot
Oh,
quicker.
I think it would.
So I'd like more details from the regulator on how...
Specifically on the issue of hedging
Yeah.
and how it relates to Power and I.
Aye.
Right, okay. That's grand.
Sure, Jim.
Members agreed, did we do that? I think.
Sure, Jim can put it well worded to them.
Right, that's all right. Okay, right, next item on the agenda is SL1, Employers' Liability Compulsory Insurance Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2015. We have a cover note of the Employers' Liability issue at page 138 and the SL1 at page 139. So, this SL1 is subject to negative resolution, and the proposed date of operation is the 1st of April 2015. It's the committee's opportunity to consider the policy as laid out in SL1. It isn't possible to amend this once the rule has been made and laid out in the Assembly Business Office. So if members are content with the policy proposals at the moment. Agreed. Right. Now, agenda item number 10. This is a written briefing from the Protect Our North Coast, and we have the summary of the meeting with the group on the 2nd of February. That's Phil, Paul and myself met with them. Now, there are quite a lot of issues in this, and including the fact that there's a live planning application ongoing at the moment. Okay, now, just in regard to the issue, there's specific things around what might be Detty's remit in this, but there are also other very specific issues around the concerns, which I know if I were living there, I would share with the people about the proximity of these this well in relation to their dwelling houses and stuff. So now, in the first instance, I think we should ask the department for its views on what we have had submitted to us from the action group, right? If members are happy with that, but I'm going to make a further recommendation in that we share it also with the Environment Committee, because there are clear issues that they have arisen, that they've raised with us, that concern planning and environmental concerns. So are members happy enough with that approach, unless there's anything further they want to add at this stage?
Great.
So what are you proposing, just to
That
throw the
we
whole
ask-
stuff over to the department?
We ask Getty for their response to it in the first instance, and that we share it with the Environment Committee, because there are clear environmental and planning concerns that they've raised with us. Certainly, some of them very justifiable.
Yeah.
So, if we're happy enough with that course of action, agreed?
Great.
Yep. So, now, just on that, what they did do was, in terms of the action, they did raise issues around what's happening here and what's happening in other jurisdictions in terms of the approach to this, and they said some things that they alleged that the company had approached the matter in, they wouldn't have got away with in other jurisdictions. So would we be happy enough just to share this with Assembly Research as well, and ask them for a view on those particular matters. They're saying conventional, unconventional exploration, and just get them to look into these matters where they have raised issues about what has been happening or not happening in other jurisdictions, and compare and contrast with what they're saying. Yes, it was Jim's reminding me here is if that particular issue, proximity to wells and dwellings, was their principal concern.
There's also concerns there about due diligence and the number of times that the licence holder or the owner of the licence has changed. There are certain issues there to that in terms of licensing. And
that's what I was going to suggest to you, Phil. I would venture that one there is an issue for DETI to respond.
There's a number of things in here that DETI have to respond to.
So, okay, happy enough with that. Agreed. Thank you. Now, move on to agenda item number 11, which is correspondence. Papers for this are from page 174 onwards. Okay. And there's one item of correspondence on the index link, that's on page 173, which has been marked for members to discuss, and that's the item on the proposed UK-wide consumer rights bill from the Minister. Okay. So are members content with the suggested actions?
Chair, could I just make a small point on
Yes,
the children's bill, and I declare an interest. It's a private member's bill that I proposed. At first glance, the committee might feel it's not within the remit of this committee, but I would argue that children are the responsibility of all departments, and perhaps specifically around the issue of the number of children in poverty whose parents are in work, and the whole aspect of making work pay in terms of tackling poverty. I think it might be, it might not be the committee with the largest interest in the bill, but I would just say in that regard.
Maybe just
some.
on that, Stephen, certainly I'm very open to the idea. Do you want to maybe put a bit more meat on the bones of that for us?
As to what the bill...
Yes.
The bill is effectively about the joined-up working between government departments and agencies.
I'm not specifically talking about today. If you want to maybe submit something in writing.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Next week.
Yeah.
That's grand. Thank you. Okay. And then we move to agenda item number 12. Any other business? Unless any members any further business. The date, time, and place of the next meeting will be next Tuesday, the 24th, room 29 at 10 o'clock. Thanks very much for that today. That was very useful engagement we had earlier. So
Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.